right, welcome back to the Unbroken Ground. This is season 4, episode 7, and continuing as I have always been, and it's been a little slow, so I get that. Sorry, there's been a little bit of break in between the last episode and this episode, and Jim's been at camp, so we haven't had any Jim episodes either. So it's been a while, but hey, I'm back, and hopefully won't take such a long break, but sometimes it just takes a little while to have some things to say. But episode 7, season 4, episode 7, and I'm actually I haven't run out of lyrics or songs on the Postal Service, but I am going to pull one out of from the same song. I know it's early in the game, and already pulling one out, so sad to hear that, but it really fits really well. But the song that's called Charts and Graphs, there's a line in there. I think I explained this on the other episode, but I'll go into it here as well. So the song is about a couple that's breaking up, and the guy is saying, explain to me how there could be anything better than getting married, and the girl is like, I've brought charts and graphs to explain why I have to leave, and there's a towards the end of the song, or towards the end of her part, there's a line that says, my heart won't heal right if you keep tearing out the sutures. So season 4, episode 7 is gonna be my heart won't heal right, and I think it fits well with at least the theme of where I'm starting out. You know, these things are free form, and so who knows where I end, but that is the title, and that's what we're going with. So welcome back to the Unbroken Ground. My name is Paul. This is my little podcast that I like to do and have fun with, and hopefully encourage some people to follow Jesus in bigger and bolder and better ways, or at least just have something to listen to while they're going about their day, so that they are not bored out of their mind. And thank you for listening, and tell your friends if you find it entertaining or helpful or encouraging. And let's jump on in. So, hey, thanks for sticking around and coming back and maybe listen for the first time. The no listening required to the other episodes. I mumble on and ramble on regardless of whether you've heard them, and can't promise that it'll make any more sense. But today or tonight or wherever you might be during your time zone, I wanted to just kind of, I guess, kind of like work through by speaking out loud about a topic that I've been just thinking through, and so I'm going to do that. And so I want to freely admit that some of my conclusions are not fully baked yet, and so I'm still thinking through some of these things. And still trying to sort out theology just surrounding them. And so just be aware of that. But if you've listened to many of my podcasts, you know that one of the central themes that come back to is definitely in suffering, and why they're suffering, and how we work through that, and I do think that the modern church has an issue with that in that area, because the idea of embracing suffering, or I think maybe even the reverse idea. Let's start there. The reverse idea is like, if you follow Jesus, if you make the right choices, then you will be blessed. This is not necessarily a bad conclusion to make. It's not necessarily a wrong conclusion. Like, there's this idea that following Jesus has, in and of itself, a reward, or a better way. Like, it's a better way. It's a better path. And so there's like, it's easy to jump to this kind of conclusion, or this idea that, if you're following Jesus, then your life is going to be easier, or more blessed or more without, suffering or those type of things. And then there's, biblical stories and even like non-biblical stories of people who are followers of Jesus, and they go through these trials and tribulations, and they have these health problems, and then they're healed, and it's like, yeah, because I'm a follower of Jesus, and yet then there's other people who don't receive that. And so you kind of have to like work through and deal with that. Like, what do you do with the fullness of experienced humanity, and when things consistently don't work like you think they should? So can we even understand or ask those questions? And so for me, one of the things that I think about, there's a common thread I think that runs throughout the Bible, and I like to see systems and the common things that are in those systems. And so one of the things to think about is those that are wounded, and to give you, I mean, obviously spiritual wounds can be a thing too, but I think about even those that have kind of like this physical wound to them, and I think about there's this story, right, in Genesis, and it's about Jacob. And so those of you who don't know, maybe aren't as up on the story of what's of the Old Testament or whatever, but so Isaac, who is the son of Abraham, and Sarah, the only child, he's taken up to the mountain to be sacrificed. Apparently, that's what God told Abraham to do. And as they get up there, then suddenly, a ram appears. There's a sacrifice. He doesn't have to sacrifice his son. So good news, happy days there. But Isaac, but there was family troubles in this and that, because before they had Isaac, they had they actually had Sarah had her handmaiden have a basically had Abraham sleep with her, and they had a child, and that child got banished and was hated, and because it wasn't God's plan, and they just kind of took things into their own hands, and in doing so they definitely caused some major issues and problems. And so Isaac comes from this like family, already kind of had this brokenness. Like Abraham had some problems, right? Like sometimes we think about Abraham and how faithful he was, but I mean, like if you stop and read the stories, and you're like, yeah, he was faithful, but even though he was faithful when he went to these foreign places, he told Sarah to lie, because he was afraid that if they thought that Sarah was his wife, they would have to kill him so they could make Sarah, like they could take Sarah as the wife. And so several times they go into these cities, and he's like, yeah, tell them that you're my sister, right? And in one point, Pharaoh was like, cool. So just the sister, all right, come be a part of my harem, and Pharaoh is cursed by God, and Pharaoh, and so Abraham has to go pray for him, and Pharaoh's like, dude, why are you lying? Like you're like, I am in seriously trouble here because of this issue, because of what you're doing. And so, like, yes, Abraham had great faith, and even makes it like into the faith chapter, right? But I mean, we have to balance that with like this realization that yes, he got up and left and he went, but he was still human. He still made mistakes. He was still afraid. He had faith, but he had trust up to a certain level, sure, but he did. Like I said, he lied about Sarah being a sister. He slept with Hagar. Despite that not being God's plan, that's not without any direction. Just like Sarah was like, I can't have a baby, so maybe Hagar can, and she did. Like, and we don't really know. Like, we're not really recording like what Abraham said to that. But I mean, Abraham could have said no. I mean, that was an option. Um, you know, but not one he chose. So so just all that to say that Isaac had a pretty had some interesting family life that he came from, and he tended to favor one of the one. He had two sons, and he tended to favor one over the other. He favored Esau, who was this, mountain rough man going out hunting, macho man, and did not favor Jacob. And Jacob was kind of portrayed as this mama's boy that cooked in the tents and didn't go out and wasn't really like a warrior and those type of things. And so they, Jacob and his mom hatched this plan on how to get the blessing of Esau, even though he was not the firstborn, because they were twins, and so Esau came out first, but Jacob came out holding on to Esau's heel, and so so they trick Esau out of his birthright, and Esau, to be fair, I mean let's not forget this. Esau sold his birthright for a bowl of soup. So at that, Esau was not exactly innocent in all this as well. So there was some things going on with that, obviously. But they officially trick Isaac. Isaac gives his birthright away, and Jacob runs away because his brother's like, when I get done mourning my father, because his father passed away shortly after that, I'm gonna come kill you. And so Jacob flees because he's not a warrior, because he's like, I'm not about that life, and I ain't about to get killed. So he runs away, and he meets the beautiful Rachel, and decides he wants to marry her, and then there's this whole switcheroo with Leah, because Leah was the older sister, and but she had weak eyes, whatever that meant, and so Leah, was married to Jacob first, and then Jacob got to marry, and there was years of work in there, and at some point Jacob decides to go back to his homeland and return to his brother, and there's all kinds of like Jacob, like as you read, he's just kind of a clever dude, but he's kind of like a trickster. He's kind of a he's not like an honorable person. I mean, he stole his brother's birthright. He figured out a plan on how to make his flock grow better than Laban's, and then acted innocent. Laban, of course, made him marry his oldest daughter before he could marry his youngest daughter. So, nobody's innocent in the story. But Jacob is not like this upstanding, hero of the faith of look how righteous and pure. Is more like here's this scoundrel, right? And he is, he's not yet, but he's going to become Israel. He's on his way back to see his brother, who he is still very much afraid that his brother's going to kill him, because of that whole birthright stealing thing. And he basically puts everybody out in front of him except his favorites, as in hey, well, if they start killing people, at least they'll start with the people I don't like, and then I can run away. Probably is what he was thinking. But he puts in he goes to sleep, kind of one night away from reconnected with Esau, and there's this strange scene. Middle of the night, Jacob is awoken, and he starts to wrestle with this dude, this angel, depicting really like God, like he's wrestling with God, and he won't let go until he of the guy. He's like, I'm not gonna let go until you tell me your name. And so they wrestle and they wrestle and they wrestle until about the break of dawn. The guy reaches over and touches Jacob's hip and breaks it basically, and so that Jacob lets go, and so he gets this name, and he's going to be Israel, and he from that moment he walked with a limp. He wrestled with God, and he walked with a limp. Like, there was a spiritual, there was something spiritual going on, but it manifested itself in a physical way, and he was wounded. And from that day forward, he never walked the same. He wrestled with God, and he came out limping. And I think there is a theme that just goes throughout the Bible, and so, like, if you believe that God put together the Bible and made sure that every word and everything was in its place exactly as it should be, and which I do believe that God has watched over the creation and the continuation of the Bible as is, and so there is I think themes and things that you can look into, and the only thing that one of the conclusions you have to be able to draw is that they're in there for a reason, and mostly we draw this. I think they're in there the reason because humans are going to need to hear these stories and begin to see themselves in them, to learn from them, to gain comfort and hope and joy and all those things from them. And so I think the theme that runs through here is that though wounded, though hurt, though suffering, we're still called to walk with God. And sometimes it even seems that the wound comes directly from God, or He directly says He's not gonna take it away. And so I mean, you can, if you want, you can jump over to the New Testament. You can find Paul, and Paul is not this dude who is known to complain. Like, if you read his notes on, like, his trip, like he's like, oh, you want to hear about a trip, and he starts to talk about suffering and what he had to go through, getting beaten with 39 lashes and stoned and been in shipwrecks and lost at sea and in destitution and in starvation and on and on and on. Paul's like, I'm not even complaining. I'm just letting you know, like this is how I have suffered in order to follow Jesus and in order to be an apostle, to the Gentiles. This is what I have done. And yet there's this part in Scripture where Paul is like, there's something going on, and we don't even know. Like, there's speculation that it's some kind of physical element, maybe something a spiritual affliction even. We don't know. And he prays to God. God, take this, he calls it his thorn in his flesh, and he says, God, take this thorn from me. And he does that 3 times. And after the 3rd time, God's like, my grace is sufficient. My strength is made perfect in your weakness. God says, I'm not going to heal you. I'm not going to take that thorn away. I mean, and this is this is Paul, who gets bitten by a poisonous snake and is unaffected, who prays for little girls who are demon possessed and they're healed, who suffers and is known and is a friend of Jesus, and he says, God, I've got this thing, it's bothering me. And God says, I'm not going to take that away. Though he could. And Paul knew that he could. Like he said, but my grace is sufficient. And like, I think that's one of the, I think, like, until you go through real hard suffering and struggles, like all of that is kind of like academic. Like it seems when all of life is in front of you, and you haven't had to deal with loss and pain, and some people have to deal with loss and pain at a super early age. So I'm not saying that there aren't people, but I think a lot of Christians and a lot of pastors, they kind of float through life without having, like, things just fall in place. And I am perfect example of things falling, like things fall my way most of the time. I am and too much of my life I've been ungrateful and unappreciative to just how easy and how, like, without even trying most of the time, things turn out good for me. Like without like I'm blessed with a solid family system. I had both my parents who loved me and stayed together and raised me together and taught me, the importance of education, and like I have fallen up for sure. Like I am grateful, and I have been blessed in so many ways. And so so I just want to start there. But I've also seen and experienced, and like I've seen like the suffering, and sometimes, I mean, like I have some good friends who and they're big influences in my own spiritual journey, but I've seen, and like, I mean, I just, like, if you want to do a laundry list of the things that they've gone through, and it's like, I mean, their daughter was sexually abused when she was at a young age. She had cancer around the same time. When she turned 16, 17, she was driving a car and in her driveway and flipped the Suburban and she died. And like, that's enough, right? Like that is a lifetime of suffering and hurt, and that you have to recover from. And I remember meeting, first time meeting them about 8-10 years after their daughter had passed, 15 years maybe. And like they were just so in love with God, and they knew that, like, they didn't know why. They didn't know, and at this time they had been kind of run out. They were camp directors, and there was some kind of disagreement, or somebody decided to go in a different direction, and so this the only thing they'd done their entire life they were having to move on from, and got moved in big ways and some of that, but like they didn't. Like, they just knew, they just kept this hope that if they could refine that faith and hope and joy, even after all that suffering, if they could just reconnect with God in that, and it took some time to find beauty but they did, and they couldn't stop talking. They still can't stop talking about how good God is, how much they love Him, and how they want to share. And then they're like, yeah, because if we go through this, then that means that we are prepared to help other people. And there's just, and it just, it just hasn't stopped. Like, they still, they thought they were getting, their families were, their kids were getting married and things, and then they had just another tragedy, and it's really torn their family apart, and they don't know why, and they pray that, a lot of that, they pray for their kids, because their kids are walking away, and And it's just like, of the people that, they don't deserve that. And yet they're still like, yeah, well, we think God will use this to help us minister to somebody else. And I think about Paul and Jacob. I think about the people that in walking with Jesus, they become the collateral damage, the wounds that don't heal, the hurt that doesn't make sense, the unfairness. And I'm not saying they're perfect people, or that they don't have their own sins that they walk through, or they don't have their own doubt that they walk through, but it's just like, it's just a theme that you see in the Bible of people who just wholeheartedly chase after God, and yet the world just afflicts them, just wounds them, just brings them tragedy. And the world watching around thinks like, oh yeah, this is when they break. This is when they're gonna turn and give up and stop believing in that silly God, and they don't. And I think that just is one of those things that makes it just makes no sense. But it's so right. It makes no sense to continue to trust in God even when things around you fall apart. I mean, just from a pragmatic standpoint, right? It just makes no sense. Like if you're trusting and you this all powerful being and things are gonna go your way, and they just fall apart. Like it just makes no sense. Unless there's more to it than just I'm following Jesus or I'm following God because I want a charmed life and I want to be protected from the things that cause harm or hurt or suffering. And I think the theme throughout the Bible that you just continue to see is that you don't see people supernaturally protected. Like if you were going to write a book to invite people into and like you're gonna want to like make some good stories, and good stories are gonna be like and then I mean there are some stories like that, like Daniel especially, right? Like you have Daniel in the lion's den, and the lions don't eat him, and he gets to be this great part gets put up to the ruling class. You have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or Rakshak and Benny if you're a VeggieTales fan, and like they're like, even if the fire slays me, I still will not bow to you, King Nebuchadnezzar. And they go into the fire, and there's a fourth one, and they don't suffer. And I mean, there's stories like that too, but more, I feel like, and again, I should probably. Maybe I should do a study on this, but I think more you see stories of people who suffer great hurts, like Moses, I mean, just all the things that Moses goes through. He's saved from the reeds, given back to his family. Then he's raised in Pharaoh's house, and one day he feels like he's gonna create lead the rebellion against Pharaoh and help out his fellow people. And so he takes murders an Egyptian, and suddenly instead of like jumping out and coming with him, the Israelites are like, oh, you're a murderer, and like he runs away in the wilderness, and he's in exile, and then like then he has to leave. Then he goes through the whole getting them out of Egypt, right? And now he's got to lead the Israelites, and lead the Israelites. And the first thing they like, not even like 5 days down the road, they're already complaining. They're already moaning and complaining about how bad things are, and like Moses, he was afflicted with loneliness because he was having to lead, and you have David, and David he's anointed as king, but he spends the next 10 to 20 years doing nothing as a king. Instead, he's being persecuted, right? He's being chased by the king. He's living in the wilderness and trying to avoid the king being killed by this king whom he loves and whom he serves. Jesus himself did not keep himself from having to suffer. There's I can't explain a lot of things. Like I've been to school, I've studied the theology, I have some of the words, but it just doesn't always make sense, I guess. And there's a scene in the Bible where Jesus he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, and the night before he's going to be betrayed, before his crucifixion, and he is in some stress, and it's hard to reconcile sometimes because John like kind of paints this picture of like this triumphant Jesus who's like, no man takes me if the Father doesn't allow that, like he's like this like John is telling this story, and Jesus is this commanding figure, and yet there's other depictions where Jesus in Matthew is just so troubled in his spirit, and he knows he needs prayer, and he asks his friends to pray for him, but they can't. They're in real danger, and they fall asleep. And I think I said this somewhere else, but it's such a it's one of those like insights that comes to you that you just got to continuously share. If you remember when the disciples were with Jesus in a boat, and they're going across the lake, and suddenly the storm comes across, and they are frightened that they're going to die, and yet Jesus is asleep in the boat. And Jesus, they're like, Jesus, wake up. Aren't you afraid? Like, are you just going to let us die? And Jesus is like, why are you so afraid? And he calms the winds, right? And he's like, so at the time when there wasn't any real danger, the disciples couldn't sleep. Jesus was asleep. And at the time when there was real danger, where there was real struggle, when Jesus needed them the most, they couldn't stay awake. They were falling asleep. And there's just the parallels there. When Jesus needed his fellow disciples, his fellow friends, his friends to lift him up, encourage him in this terrible moment of stress and weakness that he was in. And again, I can't explain why that, John is very much more of this triumphant picture, but Matthew is like, it says he's so stressed, right? He's dropping, his sweat's dropping like it's drops of blood, like it's so thick, like he is. And he's praying this prayer, God, if you can take this cup of suffering from me, please do. And he finishes, but not my will, but yours. God, I don't want to go through what I'm about to go through. I don't want to do it, but I will. I will. God, if there's any other way, though. And he goes to find his friends, and they're asleep. He is full distress mode, and his friends can't even stay awake. Like, there's a song that I don't know if I love it because I love what it says, or if I found it at the right time when I was walking through some of my darker periods. But you know what? Shortly after I found out, Callie found out that she had been diagnosed with breast cancer. I found a Christian artist called Death Theory, I think it is. Oh, I should look this up. I don't want to get this wrong. I've talked about this before too, so sorry if, like an old man, I just continue to repeat myself. But this has, I hope, a little bit different. Or you feel like it's different? I don't know. It's really up to you, I guess. As you listen, Death Therapy. That's it, Death Therapy. And it's a cover of an Andrew Peterson song. So Andrew Peterson actually wrote the song and sang it and did a great job with it. But Death Therapy is this techno rock bass. You just have to listen to them. They do a lot of good stuff if you like rock. But anyway, he covers this Andrew Peterson song called "The Silence of God," and talks about how hard it can be to see, fellow believers who around you are saying things like, all my troubles are nailed to the cross. And yet, he asks the line, he says, but what about followers? What about when even followers get lost? And transitions to this bridge. And it's beautiful in Death Therapy because so the guy is singing the most of it, but then this girl from Fireflight sings the bridge part, and it's talking about this. And I think Andrew Peterson actually was in Kentucky in a monastery, and he was like actually going through it, and so like that's part of his songs. But as he was trying to figure out his grief and his what to do when like faith doesn't feel like it's enough, when the wound is fresh and heavy and big and feels like it's gonna overshadow everything, and you don't know where to go or what to do, and you pray God to remove it, and God says my grace is enough. But even then you like you're still like, yeah, but I just don't know. I don't like all like all you can do is just hold on, right? You're just in the storm, and you're holding on as tight as you can to those words of Jesus, to that Spirit, to that to the Father who's with you, and he's like, there's a statue of Jesus in a monastery nook in the hills of Kentucky, and it just recalls that night in Gethsemane when all of Jesus' his friends are sleeping, and Jesus, by all intents and purposes, we can see from the Gospels, he suffered. He had, I don't know if doubt is the right word, but he had a moment where he was like, God, I don't want to go through what's about to happen to me. The pain, the suffering, the separation, whatever that is, and again, you will have to work out your own theology around some of that. He's like, I don't want to do it, God, but if there's any way other than this, let me, but not my will, but yours. And it says that he never forgets. The man of all sorrows is one of the titles for Jesus, and it says that he never forgets the burdens that we carry. And the last line of that song is that the aching remains, but the breaking does not. The aching remains, but the breaking does not. And I think that there are people in this world and in the past and then that we read about in the Bible who walk with a limp, who know they ache what it is to wrestle with God. A dark night of the soul, a contest of faith, a victory over doubt, a moment of clarity in the midst of the chaos that just seems to swirl around us. It just transforms you. Sometimes just for a moment, sometimes just that's all you need. And other times you got to just keep clinging to Jesus. Holding on. Just because storms are going to come. You're not guaranteed. Like Jesus told his followers, he said, you're going to have trouble in this world. Like the promise was not that like, hey, your life is going to be easy. You know, you're going to have trouble in this world and you're going to have to figure out what to do with that. He didn't say, hey, I'm going to protect you from the trouble. I mean, like it kind of points to like over and over again. He's like build your house on the rock, right? Because the word of God. Because if you build anything else, it's sinking sand. Because when the trouble comes, not if, not well, just in case. This is like, no, you're gonna have trouble. So make sure you've built a foundation on the solid rock. That your faith is built on nothing less than the solid rock of who Jesus is and what he's done and his righteousness, that you're leaning into that because the trouble is going to come. And if you've built on anything else, it's going to knock you over. You're going to get swept away. And yeah, I don't have a good or easy answer for why things happen. It's not an easy question to answer. And but there's a guarantee that you will find hard times in this life. You may bring them on yourself, your bad choices, your sin. You may not. They may be brought upon you by the bad choices and sins of others. You may just be brought by circumstances. Just beyond your control. You know, some people are genetically predisposed to have certain diseases. Some people aren't. Sometimes it's not even in their families. There's nothing that would even point to that, and all of a sudden they've got it. You know, that cancer or that debilitating disease or that the thing that you have to suffer through. And it's just there, and it's just a reality, and it changes how you approach life and what you do with life and what you're thankful for, and what you're grateful for. You know, good days that are pain-free. Answers to questions that doctors haven't been able to answer. Solutions to problems, healing that comes that's unexpected. I think we are I just think that if you want to follow Jesus, if you want to get close to Jesus, that an expectation should be that you will experience struggle, suffering, and wounding. And it's really important what you do when you experience that. It's important you have, I think, people that love you surrounding you. And I know that I look to my friends who I talked about earlier that have experienced just so much struggle, so much pain. It's not fair. It's not fair to them that they're still going through it, that they should be in some golden age and they should just be happy grandparents that don't have to deal with all the things, and yet they are. And they look at it and they go, oh, this is another thing for us to go through so that we can bless somebody else. And they bless people all over the place. And I am challenged by that, because I am like, enough is enough. Like, you guys have been through enough. And God's been good to them, and like they've gotten to do things and see things and be things and be places, and like it's not just but man, enough is enough. And yet I'm not God, so I can't decide that. I can't know that, and I'm not like going, hey, take their suffering, give it to me. I'm not like, no one is, I think, wanting to suffer, but I'm willing to walk with Jesus. I think there comes a point in everybody's life that the disciples experienced with Jesus. When the crowds were leaving, they'd given up. They had decided that Jesus wasn't worth following. He was a madman, or whatever they decided. They're headed out. They're going away. And Jesus turns to his followers and his closest, his 12, right? His boys. And he's like, I mean, almost in this vulnerable way. Because Jesus would have gone it alone, right? Like he 100%. If he needed to, he would have just gone. He would have just kept going alone. Like, he would have done that. Like, he understood. He knew what he was to do, and he knew who he was, and who had called him, and who he was serving, and what he was doing. Like he knew he would have gone it alone. But he looks at his closest friends, and in this moment of vulnerability, and just like, well, what's gonna happen? He's like, will you leave too? Are you going to? And of course, Peter goes, Jesus, like, you have the words of life. Where else could we go? We don't, like, Peter doesn't say, Peter doesn't say, those people, they just don't understand. In fact, it's probably safer to say that Peter was like, I don't even get, Jesus, I'm with him. I don't know what you're talking about, dude. Like, you're preaching crazy again. But here's the thing I do know. Like I don't understand what you're talking about. Like, what do you mean eat flesh and drink blood? Like, because that's what Jesus feeds the 5,000, and then they come and they're like, that was cool. Let's have some more food, because, hey, if you make us food, I don't have to work anymore. I don't have to, right? Like, there, and so Jesus says, like, well, if you want to be part of my kingdom, and they're like, yeah, because you feed us. He says, well, you gotta eat my flesh and drink my blood, and they're like, this teaching is too hard. They're like, I ain't gonna be a cannibal for you, Jesus. Like, I'm not doing that. And of course, we would say, well, he's pointing forward to this spiritual Passover that's gonna happen, and he was. I'm not saying he would, but like, we can look. Hindsight is really awesome at this point, but the disciples were like, yeah, like, this is confusing, Jesus, and I don't really know what you're talking about, but what I do know is that I've experienced that you have the words of life, and I don't get that. I can't get that from anybody else. So where would I go? Where would I go? And I think we all have to come to a point, if we're truly serious about that chasing after Jesus, is that there comes a point in our maturity as believers that we come to that point where Jesus is like, are you still with me? And you have to choose. And I think sometimes, no, I don't want to say that. I think that there's going to be a place where the doubt is loud enough, and for some people it's going to be multiple times, maybe multiple times a day, but multiple times where the doubt is loud enough that there's a part of it that says, do you really believe? Do you really believe in any of this? Do you really believe in any of this? And then you got to search your heart and make a choice. You got to search your heart and decide what it is. Is it true? Do you believe any of this? Is Jesus really who he says he is? Is the church really what it's supposed to be? Are you part of the body? Are you really following Jesus? And if doing so, is this really what God wants you to do? Can you hear the Spirit? Can you experience the fullness of life and the fullness of what it means to walk with Jesus and to walk in the Spirit? Do you really believe that? Or you just dress nice on Sunday and show up at church because it makes you feel good. I mean, I'm not against that. Please show up, but more than that is that moment where Jesus says, "Do you really trust me?" Because in the midst of the storm, all that you'll have, all that you can do is just hold on to that hope and hold on to that trust. There's not enough explanations in the world for why someone would have to go through so much suffering in such a young age. It makes no sense. And yet there's just a part that's like Jesus saying, it doesn't. But do you trust me? Will you follow me? Will you walk with me? Will you still love me even when the world stops making sense? Even when there's no visible benefit, but instead it's just you following because the hope is eternal. And temporary, it may seem like all things are lost, but the hope is not. So we know that the aching, the hurt, it just doesn't go away. You can't snap your fingers and make the sorrow and the pain and the wounds go away. But we can trust in knowing that God, in Jesus, in the Spirit, he makes things new. And so the breaking, it won't remain. And it makes it clear, the Bible does. You may or may not see the conclusion of that this side of heaven. I think one of my least favorite passages, and I refer to it a lot, but I think it's just important, is that when you get to the end of the in Hebrews, you get to the end of the heroes of the faith, which again, Abraham is one of them, and he lied because he was so afraid. Anyway, sorry, sidetrack. Go back and listen to the first part of the podcast again. But you get to the end of that, and it's like, and there were people who got their sons back, and they got, and they had miraculous things and healings and all that, and then there were still others who did not. They were sawed in half. They were killed by the sword. They wandered around destitute, and yet this world was not worthy of them. They didn't get to see the blessings like others did, but it didn't matter. They were children of God, following after Jesus, living in the moment where the ache, where the wound was real, but the breaking was not, and this world was not worthy of them. So I guess that's as I do so many times, I guess this is where we leave it. The Bible tells enough stories about wounded, hurting people who still choose to trust and follow after God, that it has to be descriptive of how people in this world are going to experience life. And God wanted us to know that it wasn't a sign of his abandonment, wasn't a sign that he wasn't good, but rather it was part of what it meant to be a follower of Jesus, is that you signed on, for better or for worse, through trial and tribulation, through blessing and through struggle. And so if today maybe you've never answered that question, Jesus has looked at you and said, are you going to leave too? And doubt is just, fighting you upside one down and up one side and down the other. And I just want to encourage you to think about what Peter said, but more think about what it means for you. Jesus, you are life. Where else am I going to go? You have the words of life. You have the way of life. You are the life. Where else could I go? I don't understand. So many things don't make sense. So many things don't add up in our math. But Jesus, you are the life. You have the words of life. Where else can I go but in your presence? So that's the challenge, my friends. That's the encouragement. If you find yourself wounded, hurting, disappointed with this world, disappointed with the church, disappointed with Christians, disappointed with people, come back to finding Jesus. And it doesn't have to be instant. Like I'm not trying to say let's snap our fingers and whoop, everything's better, right? No, I'm just saying that, like, when you cling to him, like he can heal some of those things. He can bring life where there was death. He can change you. And your heart may not be in an instant, but it can be done, and he will do it. Cling to him. Lean on him. Lean into him. And as he's asking that question, you feel that in your soul. Will you leave too? May you say, not me. Jesus, you have the words of life. So that's the encouragement, my friends. Finding those words of life, finding how to lean into that, and to chase after Jesus with all that you have. Cling to him if that's all you can do. Maybe you can't chase after him. Maybe all you can do is hold on to him and just ask why, and just pray and hope and help him. Allow him to help you find your way through the day. Thank you guys for listening. I hope that you have a blessed week, and I hope that you find your life is full of examples of Jesus being the truth, the life, the words of life, and no one else has. Hopefully we'll get to share with you guys again. Be blessed.